Welcome to Keeping the World Company on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today we'll talk about Israel's new and even more threatening war. Will Israel be able to stop Iran's nuclear program? Our co-host for the show is Tim Apicella. Our esteemed guest for the show is Gene Rosenfeld, formerly an academic researcher at UCLA. Welcome to the show. Israel's attack on Iran and its efforts to stop Iran's nuclear program is the most significant and threatening event since October 7th. And we need to follow it in great detail since it will have significant effects and implications not only for the Middle East, but also for the world. Our panelists, Tim Apicella and Gene Rosenfeld, will compare notes on the status of Israel's war against Iran and Iran's retaliation. So, Tim, let me go to you first. What is the status of Israel's war against Iran and Iran's retaliation?
Israel has excellent intelligence capabilities, and they probably have figured that now's the time that Iran's only, weeks, months away from actually having 1, 2, or as many as 9 nuke missiles capability. And so Israel is engaged in a kinetic war to take away that threat in the Middle East. Now, remember that Israel does have new capabilities. They don't like to talk about it, but they do have it. And now the question is, to what degree has Israel solicited the United States' help in this attack? Donald Trump, to quote Donald Trump, he said, "I may do it, I may not do it." There's a statesman for you regarding, committing into a war. I mean, right now there is a kinetic war taking place. When you bomb someone, you have engaged in formal warfare. And we now have a war in the Middle East, as we did in Gaza. How many more will in the Middle East, and how much will it, tolerate before the whole place goes on fire? So we're at that very critical junction point, and I'm concerned. But at the same time, I do agree with Netanyahu's claim that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. And that's also been, said by Donald Trump. So there we are. To what degree have their capabilities been hampered so far with the bombings? And it seems that Israel has the upper hand. They have superiority in the skies. They know where all these facilities are. They've taken a lot of them out. There's still those that exist. They're probably way, way deep underground in tunnels. And they don't have the capability of the 5,000-pound bunker bombs that the United States has. And they need those bombs and those delivery apparatus to lay those bombs down and take out these facilities. That's where the United States comes in hand and to play. And I don't think Donald Trump is committed as yet.
Yeah, we're waiting on it. It's like he's got everybody in the world, literally everybody in the world, waiting on him. That's what I call a terrific reality show. He must have so many eyeballs on him now. It's a record. And this is his way of distracting us from what happened over the weekend when everybody was protesting against him and nobody showed up at his parade. But let me add that my understanding of it is that the Israelis have done very well to destroy 2 out of the 3 refinement facilities in Iran. The third one, however, is way deep underground, and it is beyond the reach of their penetrating bombs. They don't have a bomb big enough to penetrate, a penetrating bomb big enough to penetrate to that facility. But the U.S. does. The U.S. has this huge bomb. It's actually 30,000 pounds. And if you divide 2,000 pounds for a given ton, it's 15 tons of bomb. And, there are no Israeli planes can carry a bomb that big, even if Israel had a bomb like that. But the stealth fighter can carry it. And the question is whether Trump will allow the stealth fighter into the theater with this bunker buster bomb to destroy the Fordo plant, which I think is on the north side of Tehran. And so what we have is a moment of inflection. And because if Trump does that, there's going to be a price to pay. It's not that the world is unified in the thought that that all these nuclear facilities should be destroyed. Of course, the alliance between China and Russia is saying no, so they oppose the use of that bomb. They oppose the entry of the United States into the war. And then you have Europe, which is a mixed bag. They're not together on it. And some countries are saying, yes, Israel and the US should destroy these facilities. Others are saying no. So the world is torn on the issue. I'm afraid I don't believe much of what Trump has to say, but he left the G7 meeting on Monday, said he had to get back to Washington because of the situation in the Middle East, in Iran. And that was Monday, and today's Wednesday. And so it's not clear what he's going to do. He hasn't done it yet, but he has dispatched certain military assets into the area, a destroyer, for example, and he's activated American facilities near Iran, like in Iraq, and he's trying to remove American citizens from Israel. And sounds like he might actually enter the war. But he hasn't actually said he would. And he has said that he hasn't decided yet. Then you really wonder with a momentous decision like that, whether, he has a process, a plan on how to deal with this, or whether it's what he had for breakfast in the morning. And so there's a large psychological element to ascertaining where we are right now. Exactly, what makes him tick. We should know what makes him tick. We think we know what makes him tick, but do we know what makes him tick? And for that, I look to Gene Rosenfeld. What is his decision hanging on, Gene, and how do you think it'll go?
I can't read Donald Trump's mind, but I have studied his background and upbringing and his personality and a little bit about social psychology of groups that, like the group he's formed, the MAGA group, which is an American proto-fascist movement that's taken over a conservative party. He's neutralized the traditionals and weakened the Democrats, which is exactly the scenario and steps that have been taken by other fascist strongmen. And he hasn't got the purchase that Hitler and Mussolini had, because this is a much stronger system of government, and we still have opposition that is heating up. So basically, what I think is happening is that he's putting all his ducks in place. We have the refueling tankers that we need coming to the Middle East, because in order for the bombers to come from Diego Garcia 3,500 miles away, they have to be refueled in the air. He's telling our bases to hunker down. He's evacuating personnel. He's everything. He's given the military, it seems to me, the orders that they need to be ready whenever Netanyahu is ready, and he's ready to pounce. However, he's very unhappy because I do believe that Israel has the great intelligence organization, but it often lies about what it's doing to the world. And one of those lies is, I think right now, that what they want to do is destroy these 3 plants underground where they're refining the uranium. I think what they're after is regime change. And I think they've talked to the Sunni Arab leaders in the area who are okay with regime change in Iran. Nobody really likes Iran, to be very honest with you. And it's a very weak regime right now. The people of Iran don't like Iran. The big order that was given that gives us a clue was evacuate Tehran. The Fordo plan is about 100 miles northeast of Tehran. The bunker buster isn't going to impact Tehran if it hits Fordo. So why do they want to evacuate Tehran? Because they want to take out the leaders at the same time they take out that plant. Because even if they take out that plant, and by the way, the bunker buster will go down 200 feet through anything, but below that, they think that's where the enrichment is. And so it's questionable whether they'll really get to where they want to get. But even if they did, Iran could rebuild all of this back. Yes, it would take longer. be a longer delaying tactic, but it wouldn't get rid of the nukes. The important thing is the regime change, and we have to look at that. And I think that's where um, Trump has conflict, because after all, he's been negotiating with these guys. In fact, one of the lead negotiators was killed by Israel. So who is he going to negotiate with? What he really wants is to look like a winner and be lauded by the entire world because he brought about the end of the nuclear program in Iran. And he can't do that under Netanyahu's military plan. So he's grumpy right now. He's really grumpy, and he's taking it out on all of us by being the usual, maybe I will, maybe I won't.
Will he?
If Israel goes ahead, he'll do anything that makes him look like a winner, or he's in charge, or he doesn't want Israel to succeed by itself in the Middle East. He wants to be the companion or the motivator. He wants its perception.
Well, Israel is going ahead as we speak. That war is being fought right now, both stroke and counterstroke, both attack and retaliation. And at the same time, I think we all agree that Fordo we cannot be destroyed or disabled without the American B-2 bomber and the bunker buster. So if I'm following your analysis, it would seem to me that for him to be the hero, he's got to do this. Do you agree?
I think he does. If it were anybody else in the Oval Office, given all the signals that the military has put in place that it's preparing to do this, and Netanyahu has definitely said he's going to go ahead, any other president, I would say they're on their way and nothing's going to stop them. But we're dealing with Donald Trump. I don't think he'll be able to stop them if Netanyahu goes ahead.
So what are the counter influences on Trump, if any? The influences that come to him and say, "Don't do this. This is bad for you." And I say you because I think it's only him that he looks at this through the lens of his own interest, not the country's interest, not Europe's interest, not the Middle East's interest, just his interest. But who and what organizations are maybe trying to stop him?
The Steve Bannon wing of the MAGA movement. His MAGA people and Tulsi Gabbard, who he recently snapped at, are totally against foreign involvements and foreign wars. They don't want that at all. And some of the young Turks in the MAGA movement and in the administration, who may be the next generation to take charge of that movement, are not for it either. Hegseth and Vance, Gabbard, all have experience in war. They're isolationists, so they want to make America great again, but they don't want to get involved in another Afghanistan or Iraq. And the people that he's gathered so painstakingly in this movement, his voters, and there's a big election coming up next year, his voters are going to break off and become independents again if he gets us involved. The other thing is, what war has ever been ended by bombing a country? What war do you know of? I mean, that other than just complete rubble and the nuclear bomb. The irony here is that you can bomb Iran with anything except nukes, and you're trying to prevent a nuclear bomb, which will probably never be used, because it's all about a power game at the highest levels. Who's going to be the hegemon in whatever region because they have nuclear capability. But the chances of somebody using it are minuscule because it's so destructive. So the question is, if Israel bombs or we bomb, that's just going to set off a whole string of unintended consequences. And we don't know how long we'll be involved. Maybe Iran will fold right away. Maybe it won't, because it's a religious government. It's very, very determined. And you don't get much more stubborn than when you have a religious war. So they could make all kinds of trouble in the Middle East all over again.
Tim, what about that? religious government. Khomeini's been in office for, oh, gee whiz, since shortly after the 1979 revolution in Iran. And he's something like 86 years old. And he may be a failing leader. Does he still have the confidence of the public? He's been very oppressive and suppressive. The people don't necessarily like him at all. They actually, a lot of them would like to get away from him, get out from under him. Do you think that there are the elements of regime change? Of course, Israel or possibly the United States could bomb him, eliminate him, and that would create regime change. But well, you don't know what happens when you have an assassination. You don't know who steps in. So my question is, how likely is it that either the U.S. or Israel can actually create a situation leading to regime change?
I think Jean's spot on when she says you have to be careful when there's a religious government that's in charge of things, because you could take out as many royal guard leaders and there's always one to replace. Well, same thing goes with religious leaders too. It's the religion that is the thing that propels the country forward, not necessarily the specific leader. So yeah, you take out the top leader of Iran, and guess what? There's one right behind him. And I think that Jean's spot on also when she says that fighting for religious purposes is far, far more persuasive for the people to follow, even though they were opposed to it before, but now they're for it, is because they're following a religion. And somehow they were able to persuade the population that this is now a religious war against the evil powers of the West. That's been used for a long time, and it's been successful. You do have a segment of Iran's population that was protesting in the street, but like any dictatorship, those protests have been squashed, people arrested, maybe even executed. Who knows? The bottom line is, just trying to take out the head of the snake doesn't always kill the snake.
Trump asked, I guess he asked Iran, but he was really asking Khomeini to surrender unconditionally. And Khomeini, said something to the effect of "nuts on you."
Yeah.
He's not going to surrender. And the only way that I suppose you can achieve regime change is to take him out, or create a situation where others take him out. So we know the chances of unconditional surrender are minimal to zero. And let's assume for a minute, this is a point that Jean raised, that he is eliminated somehow, and that there is regime change. This is a thing that has happened around the world, and especially in the Middle East many times. And what you get, well, I'm asking you, what do you get when you have a despotic government, a police state, and you take out the leader who has created and advanced this police state, and there's nobody to step into his shoes? You get, what do you get?
Well, I think they would get someone to step into his shoes, but if you didn't, then you have chaos. This was the concern when Russia folded, when the Berlin came down. Who's in charge of Russia? And by gosh, who has control over the nukes scattered all over Russia? So this was a real concern. Now, we don't know to what degree Iran does or doesn't have any kind of nuclear equipment for a bomb, missile. But remember, you could do something that was called a dirty bomb. You could have the nuclear material packaged up and transported to some country, and Israel, and explode a dirty bomb. You don't need the same technologies that you do in a normal missile capability. That's my concern, is that kind of technology taking place and that kind of terrorism taking place, if not in Europe, then certainly in the United States or in Europe. That's something to have a real concern about. So again, when you take out, it was like
Saddam Hussein.
yeah, okay. So when he was deposed or finally let out, he was a vicious dictator. But guess what? he didn't like terrorism. He didn't like those groups. And so he was actually against them. And so when we took out that crummy leader, we got a far worse situation in Iraq. And that's something that could very well be in play here in Iran, where, yeah, you may not like Khomeini and he doesn't like the United States, he doesn't like Israel, but at least he's a stable leader to the point where he's not, attacking all sides and all fronts with or without dirty bombs.
Gene, I wonder uh, whether the threats that Iran has made against Israel, it is executing those threats now with its retaliation, and its retaliation is getting through the Iron Dome in a substantial, considerable degree, and the threats that Khomeini has made against the United States, or for that matter, as he puts it, any nation that protects Israel. Not only nations that take aggressive steps against Iran, but any nation that protects Israel is an enemy of Iran, and he will retaliate against them also. P.S. There's a missile that Iran has that has a capability of 8,000 miles, which is about the distance from Iran, the western end of Iran, to the eastern end of the United States. So it is possible that they could send a missile into the United States. I don't know whether that would ever be a nuclear missile, but a missile. And so my question to you is he serious? Is he really going to do that? What I asked you before, what is Trump going to do? Now I'm asking you what Khomeini will do.
In 1970, the Iranian Revolution kicked off what a great scholar of terrorism, who I had the pleasure of working with, David C. Rappaport, kicked off what he called the fourth wave of modern terror, which is the religious wave. And a lot of other things happened in 1979. These waves last about 40 years. So this is right about the time, or a little past the time, when we see another wave take out, another wave of terror. And we haven't identified that yet. However, what Iran is engaged in and has been engaged in, it's ancient Persia, by the way, which was the empire in the region, has a great sense of pride. But now they're Shia Muslims. And Shia Muslims have a tradition of martyrdom. And martyrdom is dangerous because with martyrdom, people are not afraid of dying, and they'll go to any lengths to achieve their objective. So what they have done is they've created and supported Shia militias throughout the Middle East. And they had a Shia government in Syria, a minority government. And then they had the big militia, Hezbollah, in Syria and Lebanon, and was running the government of Lebanon. In Lebanon, when Israel took out Hezbollah, weakened it, then there was a government in waiting. And it was not a Shia fanatical government. But that's not true in Iran. The only people in Iran that can govern are Shia. And they have a certain mindset, which you have to respect. Iran and Iraq engaged in a very destructive war before we ever went into Iraq. 1 million Iranians died in that war. That's how persistent it was. And that's how Saddam Hussein was able to guard his border. And that's what it took. The Iran Revolutionary Guard, the elite troops of the Iranian armed forces, are not in agreement with the generals in the armed forces. The Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces in general, are split. The Revolutionary Guard are more fanatical than the rank and file. And many Iranian citizens, like the poor people of Gaza and now the people of Israel, are really hostage to their very aggressive and bellicose governments. So as far as the leadership is concerned, this man is elderly. He probably wouldn't survive a kinetic war in Tehran. He would be gone, but you can bet, yeah, there are a lot of militia leaders in Iraq and Iran, in the Revolutionary Guard, in Hezbollah, and you would see a different type of conflict. It wouldn't be maybe a major state against other major states. but it would be a very destructive martyr inspired, a martyrdom inspired religious conflict with many different arms to it. And this government has just come out and said, we want to basically exterminate Israel. Now they're angry and they want to get rid of Israel.
No change there. They've been saying that for a long, long time. Let me go back and ask you this question. The world seems to be focused on the question of whether it's okay for Iran to have an atomic bomb. Okay. Um, is it the end of the world that they develop an atomic bomb? Could Iran set aside its hatred of Israel and America, so that they were not a rogue nation bent on destroying Israel? Is that possible, or is it impossible?
It's very possible. Turkey had a secular, enlightened government for decades after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and they're now governed more by a religious autocrat, but not as badly as Iran. With Iran, you need a turnover within the country. This is another reason why Israel is, I think, looking at regime change. They really do feel that, okay, it may create chaos, but the Iranian people in general are not supportive of this regime. And so it would be bloody and it would be terrible, but there's a chance that the people of Iran would create a government more like the one that existed in Turkey before Erdogan took over.
Tim, Jean talked about, she followed through on your point about chaos, and it would be religious driven chaos. It would not necessarily be nation state against nation state in the Middle East. It would be tribe against tribe. It would be a terrorist organization against terrorist organization. What would it look like if 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 Trump got involved and if Iran resisted these attacks and did not surrender and did not have a regime change, or even if it did have a regime change that led to chaos? What would that chaos look like? And I'll ask you both this question, but Tim, you take a shot at it first. What would that chaos look like, and what would it mean for Israel and for the U.S.?
Wow, tough question. Let's look at Syria. What's their new regime change look like? They seem to be trying to moderate, move a little bit to the middle, and that be, your leader there was definitely a terrorist, for many, many, many years. He seems to be trying to capitulate back into the middle to be a player in the Middle East that's not perceived as a terrorist nation. I think the United States has now recognized Syria, have they not? To some degree and extent. So that could be one alternative. Or we could look at what happened the fall of Iraq and then the splintering off of terrorist organizations that have been around for a long time, even before the fall of Iraq. Look at the Taliban and then ISIS. Would you have even more groups like that? That would be maybe on the other end of the spectrum. And how scary, and to Gene's point about the Revolutionary Guard, how scary would that be if they actually had access to enriched nuclear materials? And then you don't have any one central government or central leader, but you have a splintering of groups that all share in nuclear materials and potential, dirty bombs that could scatter across the world and be used in various countries. So that's another scary proposal. That's what chaos looks like to me. Is a lack of a central government in Iran, even though it's a theocracy. At least it's a little bit more stable than most, and that's gone. And now you have splinter groups that have access to nuclear materials that the United States and Russia, excuse me, the United States and Israel and the EU really don't know what's where and who has it.
Gene, let me come back to you. on 2 points that flow out of what Tim was saying. Number one is chaos and conflict between not nation states who have a sense of responsibility, but terror organizations. That's a kind of vacuum, isn't it? And if you are if you're a nation state that takes advantage of vacuum, you're going to move in on that. Like China, for example, who I believe is supplying weapons to Iran even as we speak. China would move in. It wants a foothold in the Middle East. Russia would like to recreate its foothold in the Middle East. So the people, the opportunist countries and groups would like to come back in. And if chaos prevailed and you only had these roving bands of terror organizations going on in the Middle East after this war, that would invite other opportunist countries, wouldn't it? And assuming for a moment that it did, what would the result be?
Then let's go. We haven't made yet. Where is Iran situated geographically? It is on the western side of Afghanistan. Afghanistan now has a Taliban government, which is not necessarily a jihadi government, but it's friendly with jihadi movements and groups. That's how refuge was given to Al Qaeda when Al Qaeda began, because Al Qaeda, after all, came out of Yemen and Saudi Arabia. But it really developed and was protected and operated from Afghanistan, which is kind of a no man's land in a way. It's a country that's very broken up and very easy to hide in and create movements in. On the other side is two nuclear powers, Pakistan and India. Now, Pakistan turns toward India and has issues with India, but it also turns toward Afghanistan. In essence, Iran and Pakistan, one Shia and one Sunni, two Islamic schools at loggerheads with each other, are really wanting to be the friend of Afghanistan. They want Afghanistan basically to cater to them. You recall that bin Laden's family had a very large family, had several wives. A lot of them were hiding out in Iran. Iran was not participating in jihadism, but it was not a sponsor of jihadism. Jihadism came out of Sunni Islam, but it was giving protection to fellow Muslims. So basically, you have a lot of different ways that this could play out in terms of ideology and movement. Even if the government of Iran fell, where would these extremists go? They might go to Iraq. Iran has been trying to build up its Shia currency in Iraq. There are Shia militias in Iraq that are not friendly to the other Arab states. So, yes, it's a mess because, after all, you have the Taliban who are enabling of these movements, even if they don't participate. You have a nuclear power potentially with Iran getting nuclear power on either side of Afghanistan. And then you have Russia, which doesn't want trouble on its southern border. It tried to take over Afghanistan and stabilize, but it couldn't do it. So you have this mix of volatility. As far as chaos is concerned, the great manual for all the jihadist movements during the fourth wave religious terror was called The Management of Chaos. You create chaos, then you come in and you organize it. And you do this in a very brutal and bellicose manner. And then you use your ideology to unite the people behind you. And that's how you build a caliphate.
Well, let me talk about that. That's ISIS. But also, Iran already has, what do you want to call it, a kind of residual infrastructure with the terror groups that it has encouraged and supplied over the past few years. And I include Hamas, I include Hezbollah, I include the Houthis, and maybe other Islamic organizations there in that area. And so, and they would attack Israel. They would be renewed in their efforts, I think, and renewed in Iran's support of them, and they would be all the more aggressive in attacking Israel after this war. And I worry about that. And then you have the possibility of defending against this renewal of terrorism, organized and supplied by Iran. And Iran supplied by China, Russia, and who knows who else. Um, so if, as we talked about this before the show, if Trump or the United States under Trump's successor said, "Oh, we have to organize an alliance of European nations of the West to get in there and stabilize all this renewed terrorism in the Middle East because of what happened in the war against Iran," would Trump or his successor be able to create, to organize an alliance for that purpose? Or would Trump's dismembering of the existing alliance cast such a long shadow that it would be impossible for the US to create an alliance to preserve order in the Middle East?
If that question is directed at me, no, he doesn't have the capacity. And as far as I can tell, the team he has assembled does not have the capacity to create anything that positive. Um, he's more of a reactor than a theorist or builder. I know he's a developer and he builds stuff, but mostly he puts gold on it and then puts his name on it. And he makes lots of money that way. But I don't think he's a great innovator. And he is certainly not a statesman. And I think he tries to piggyback on the more outlandish and influential strongmen in the world to take some of their glory and look bigger than he is. Now, that's maybe a character analysis, and I apologize for that because as a historian, that's license. I shouldn't be doing that. But nevertheless, his past history, his own past history, when has he ever been able to build an alliance and work with an alliance? He had a family based company that was mainly self enriching. He's not good with people on a one to one basis. He is a charismatic leader. He can talk to crowds and say what they want to hear, but he's not. Uh, what relationships does he have in his life that are really tight relationships? Uh, I can't think of one other than the brother who died. Um, so no, we don't have an administration that can build an alliance, that can create stability, that can come up with useful plans. The Abraham Accords are based on a long-standing Arab plan that started way back in 2005, and it was an Arab initiative that was basically taken up by Kushner. He gave Kushner the imprimatur to go into the Middle East and to build, quote unquote, the Abraham Accords. But Kushner didn't build it either, and Trump didn't build it. He basically put his brand on it.
I wanted to ask you one more question before we go to final comments, and that is this. So we have the countries that Trump was visiting only a few weeks ago and made these deals, including corrupt deals, for God knows what. And he sold $1 trillion worth of arms to them, including Saudi Arabia, which is a questionable loyalty to the U.S., and Qatar and Emirates. All three of them bought weapons. All three of them got into some kind of deals with Trump. And I think that all three of them have issues with Iran, are not necessarily friendly with Iran. Where do they fit in this calculus? Will they side with the U.S.? Will they help Israel? Would they help Israel? Or would they stand on the side and do nothing? Would they support Iran? Where would they fit?
Well, they definitely won't support Iran. They are Sunni. They're not Shia, and a religious divide is as strong as it gets. It's like asking the Protestants and Catholics in Henry VIII's England to come to support one another. So no, they won't support Iran. They have decided to align with the United States, Saudi Arabia primarily, who has a new king, and he wants to build his country. His country is actually religiously the center of the Islamic world, and Islam is a world religion. And there are probably more Muslims in Indonesia than there are in the Middle East. So you see, the Arab states are ready for peace and prosperity. They're not ready for war. What Hamas did was throw a spanner into that. October 7th was designed by Iran and its proxies, including Hamas, one of its only Sunni proxies, to stop the Middle East peace process that the Arabs have been working on for so long. And they have just recently come to an agreement with Israel and with the United States. And peace was about to break out, and they just couldn't handle that. So, no, if there's going to be peace in the Middle East, it's actually going to come with prosperity. And that's why the United States is giving arms and support to Saudi Arabia. And one of the reasons Trump is doing deals with them is to enrich himself, but also to build a transactional financial relationship and presumably loyalty with Saudi Arabia. That's as close to alliance building, I think, that Trump can do.
Okay, let's go to final comments. Tim, what do within the discussion points that we've covered here, and with due regard for Trump's statement that the way to peace, just as Gene says, is through business, through prosperity. What are the chances of prosperity, of Trump creating prosperity in the Middle East and bringing everyone together on that basis? What are the chances that this war can be managed and result in a ceasefire or a settlement of some kind without the need for American aggressive involvement? What are the possibilities for a renegotiation of the non-proliferation agreement with Iran? It's an impossible question. If Trump doesn't know, how could we know? But I'm still asking you. I'm still asking you. Yeah, I want to offer you the opportunity to go anywhere you want on that question.
Okay, well, thank you for an impossible question. Hey, look, whether Iran already sees our hand in this whole attack, whether we admit it or not, they pretty much know that we're in lockstep with Israel and that we've, if nothing else, provided intelligence of one type or another. And so they already see our hand in this. Now, remember during the campaign, there was speculation that assassins were sent by Iran to take out, Trump or whoever. That now has a real possibility of happening on a stronger basis. That Iran sees our partnership with Israel, and they're going to strike out. I mean, this is a war, and whether Donald Trump says I'm involved or not, I think it's irrelevant to Iran and Khomeini. And so that's one point I'd like to make, that we are no safer, that we haven't declared one way or another, because it's already assumed that we're involved. Number two is the actual attacks on Iran. If you remember 2010, I think it was in partnership with Israel, that we took out a lot of the enrichment process of these centrifuges in Iran, and that actually had an effect. They hacked into the computer system, and they basically spun out, burned up these centrifuges, and that put Iran's enrichment process way, way back, almost from point zero. And it took a long time for them to get where they are now. I don't know if we're in the same kind of environment. I heard centrifuges where they make them, a production plant was impacted by bombs by Israel. But Iran's had a lot of years to squirrel away different sites of enrichment materials and the process for enrichment. So, will this bombing campaign by Israel be as successful as it was in 2010? I doubt it. I think it, as Gene mentioned about these bunker bombs, they're going to have to be employed a lot more places and a lot more with frequency. So that's kind of my wrap up. I'm not optimistic on what's going to take place here. I hope it's something we don't sleepwalk into a World War III or a Middle East all-out war. Um, I get some hope from Russia that they're not necessarily interested in coming forward and helping Iran out of this. They've got their own war to fight. And so that's encouraging. But you're right, Jay, about China and how they're supplying Iran, most likely. So we don't know what we don't know. And this will unfold. And unfortunately, um, anytime any war unfolds, it's not usually to the benefit of the rest of the world.
And Gene, one of the surprises, at least to me, has been I thought Israel was dispositive in its original attack, but then we find that Iran is sending back missiles and drones by the hundreds and attacking Haifa and Tel Aviv. Interestingly enough, not Jerusalem, but Haifa and Tel Aviv, and wrecking some real damage there. For the first time, I mean, even 1948 didn't have the level of damage to civilian communities as these recent retaliation attacks by Iran. And so, you have Netanyahu and his cabinet being very aggressive about this attack, this preemptive attack, and then not being able to defend Israel, those cities anyway, and other places in Israel with the Iron Dome as well as we had expected. So this is going to change Israel, even if we stop it right now today. It seems to me that the average Israeli is going to perceive his or her security perhaps in a different way than before. Anyway, what are your final thoughts?
In the first place, nobody's going to bomb Jerusalem. It's the center of three major religions. It's the, I think, third Qibla of Islam. It's called Al-Quds. And that's what the name of the special operations part of the Iran Revolutionary Guard is called, is Al-Quds. So, yes, they're not going to send a nuclear warhead to Israel because that would damage Jerusalem too. It's a sacred city. Even though there are Jews there, it's a sacred city, and it really, they think, belongs to them, and they want it back. Um, I think that I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit here and see maybe things will work. I mean, Israel has the option of going in on the ground with special operations and taking out the centrifuges and the refineries as well. It's harder, but they can do it, and they can do it under cover of U.S. help as well. I do think it's ominous that they've sent a message. Israel has sent a message, and Trump has echoed it, that people should leave Tehran. 13 million people live in Tehran. And you don't send these messages unless you're ready to strike with force, with full force. So I don't buy that they're only after these nuclear facilities, which I'm sure they want to shut down, but they're really after the people who are managing those nuclear facilities. And I don't know what plan Israel has. They've been planning this for many, many years. And I'm sure our military has game planned how it would react should they do this, because they talk to one another every year in Herzliya. They all get together and talk about these things. So there is a plan in place. It's just Trump's not happy with the plan. That's quite clear. So whether or not he is going to be a facilitator, we just don't know. On the other hand, Netanyahu has a great rep for forcing something. He is one of the most skilled politicians on the planet. And so that's why I say that Trump is grumpy. How this will play out, I don't know. I don't think it's going to change the world. I hope it's not. I think Russia is very occupied with Ukraine. They've just asked 5,000 more North Koreans to come in and help them with their war effort. Ukraine is giving them a very hard time, even though they're bombing and attacking Ukraine. So I think they're staying out of the fray right now. But in the long run, they still would rather see a friendly regime in Iran. And I'm not sure how that's going to play out vis-a-vis Putin's quote friendship with Trump. So we have a lot of unknowns and variables here that could go either way. If we bombed the Fordo plant, if we got rid of the nuclear program in Iran, we'd probably be able to deal with just having the regime there and having them cowed. That would be the best case scenario. And then Trump and Netanyahu could take credit for that, and the Sunnis would be back in control of their holy land and their sacred center, and they wouldn't be worried by a Shia rebellion or Shia militias. That's the best case scenario.
From your lips to God's ears, but I'm not sure what God we're talking about. In any event, Gene and Tim, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much to our co-host, Tim Apicella, and thank you to our guest, Gene Rosenfeld. I'm Jay Fidell, host of Keeping the World Company. We've been discussing Israel's new and even more threatening war. We'll have to follow it going forward for sure. Thanks to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha. Aloha, Gene. Aloha, Tim.